that's okay with you. I'll start off by saying that there's a lot of building and construction going on today around our area. So I apologize for all of the banging, and hopefully it doesn't disturb us too much. And to begin with, we're going to close down our eyes and set an intention for today's practice, because today's session is really all about the spirit and spiritual health in general. So we're really going to go in, and I don't even mind if you want to turn your cameras off at any point, where you can really allow yourself to be in the moment and be in the experience. And that doesn't mean you don't have to have it, it needs to be quiet or silenced or anything like that. It's just about you having an experience. So we'll close down the eyes. We'll have the feet uncrossed and the legs uncrossed. And you may wish to bring your left hand onto your heart and your right hand onto your belly. And your breathing is soft and natural. And if your eyes are closed, you can start to take your gaze inwards. And if you're watching the recording and closed eyes is just not a thing for you, then that's okay too. You can still take your focus inwards. And what I mean by that is you become really still and you allow yourself to feel the inner workings of your inner landscape. Questions you may ask yourself is, how do I feel today? What has been the resounding thought that has been taking up my attention today? Do I feel any tension or tightness in my physical body? And if so, where? And do I feel any openness and receptivity in my physical body? And if so, where? Remember to keep breathing in and out through the nose. And keeping your eyes closed, I want you to acknowledge this part of you that exists beyond the thoughts, beyond the feelings. This part of you is watching and witnessing you having the experience. It's the part of you that sees the thoughts, that sees the emotions, but yet isn't the thoughts nor the emotions. And as if you can visualize yourself connecting with that part of you, maybe you visualize a park bench and you're both sitting on the park bench together. In the next hour and a bit, we will be hanging out with this part of you. The part of you that is free from your beliefs, your judgments, your stories, free from the feelings you have about what's going on in your life. Take a deep breath in. And a long breath out. You can stay here for a little while longer if you'd like, or you can come back. Just gently opening up the eyes. And so when we start talking about the spirit and spiritual health, we can get into some misperceptions about what spiritual health actually is. So I'd like to just clarify what they are first. Maybe we start by talking about what spiritual isn't, so that we've got a good understanding of what it is. So firstly, hey Lisa, it is not religion. It is not dogma. Being spiritual doesn't mean that you have a faith, but it means you have faith. Yeah, that's totally fine. Thanks, Lisa. And there's a very big difference between having a faith and having faith. Although if you have both of them, you probably see that they're connected. But if you have one or the other, they can exist on their own. So having a faith means that there is quite possibly a religion that you believe in that has perhaps a god, maybe saints, maybe gods, goddesses, and deities in general. And they construct a set of beliefs, morals and values, rules and regulations to which you have faith in delivering something to you. Does that make sense? So I was brought up Roman Catholic. If you do this, if you live a life like this, according to these rules, then you will have this when you leave this planet, when you leave this life, in very layman's terms. Whereas having faith is something that can be it can have a much wider net. So having faith means believing in something, whether it be someone, some place, some project. I have faith in something. Now, it takes a lot of trust, regardless of what faith we're speaking about. So whether that's faith in something, someone, a project, yourself, or a religion. But for today's purpose, we're going to be talking about spirit and spirituality and spiritual health. So it's only fitting that we start talking about faith and trust because they go hand in hand with spiritual health. And in this example, especially for today, what I'd really like to connect with is faith in yourself, your ability, faith in your intuition, faith in the little person that you just visualized sitting on the park bench with you, and trust in that part of you. Trust that you're going to see what you need to see, hear what you need to hear, be with who you need to be with. I'm just going to close this window. Give me 1 second. It's very loud and very disturbing. And so when we start to look at faith and trust from a spiritual perspective, we look at it, I feel like these are two of the most profound ingredients as found in spiritual health. Now, for those of you who've watched the recordings, you would have seen me speak about physical health, mental health, emotional health. And I truly believe that all three of those things are involved in being spiritually healthy. Because the thing is that we're human beings having a human experience, which require for us to have emotions, which require for us to have thoughts, and which require for us to have physical bodies. And all three of those things are required for us to have healthy spiritual connections with ourselves and with that which we deem to be bigger than us. So regardless of what you think that is, because we're talking about energy, what I'm going to refer to is the void, or the quantum field, the field. That is the bigger than us that I'm going to refer to here. But you can fill in the blank with whatever it is that you believe in. You can fill in the blank with God, universe, source, whatever it is you want. And so we have faith in ourselves. We have trust in ourselves, with that part of ourselves that is free from the mental constructs and the emotional constructs that we create as human beings. And by having faith and trust in ourselves, in that part of ourselves, we actually and inadvertently have belief, faith, and trust in the field around us. And here's where this gets really juicy, is that we can apply this to real live events as they're happening now in our experience. As I was writing the notes for this class in particular, one of the things that came to me was this idea of being okay in crisis. It's one of the things that I've noticed in myself has been so different from a lot of my peers, my colleagues, people that I've seen in the world, where things start to get a little bit heated in the world. And then I've noticed that a lot of people start to lose their confidence in the system, lose their ability to focus on the positives, ability to be grounded and centered and stay within their own body. And I truly believe that the reason that is because of the fact that they don't have faith and trust in themselves and in the bigger picture. So when we start to connect with ourselves in a way that fosters the sense of faith and trust, naturally what happens is, because we're creating it inside of ourselves, we are then reverberating that out into the field. And that is what our perception is of what's happening. So I'd really love to hear from you if you can. I know that you may not be able to speak it out loud, but maybe just write it in the chat for me. What has been your experience of late in having this deep set connection with that which is happening in the world, and trusting that it's for the greatest good, and that everything is just as it's meant to, and you are part of the plan? Let me know. What's been your experience? Beth, I have felt very overwhelmed, actually. Yeah. You're not the only one, Beth. And you know, there's a reason why I'm talking about this as the fourth session and not the first session, because we can relate a lot of our feelings of overwhelm to the mental and the emotional body. You know, there's a lot that's going on in the world at the moment that is specifically, or has been specifically created to induce fear and overwhelm. The collective is experiencing fear and overwhelm. And if there is no sense of faith and trust in the self, then naturally what happens is that there's no faith and trust in the greater picture, you know? And it's very difficult for some of us to start to reconcile that, firstly, but also to create a sense of safety and security within ourselves, knowing that whatever happens, everything is going to work out exactly as it's meant to. Yeah. So a comment here. Yes, I understand. And even the smallest things at home have come to a head, even if I don't watch the news. Because what's happening in the collective has an effect on us personally, regardless of whether you are actively involved, watching, absorbing, being a part of the collective noise or not. Here's the thing, is that we are not separate from our surroundings. We are part of it. We are human beings having a human experience, collectively, energetically tied, because we are all one. And so this is a very big metaphysical concept that can sometimes be a little bit misconstrued, but also we can use that as a bit of a bypass. And this is not my intention here. My intention is to see that, for us to see that, A, we heal through one another. So through our relationships, through the communication and the way that we interact with the collective, whether it be your sister, your brother, your husband, your wife, or your community, or the politician that you've never met before, yet you have an opinion of, right? The way that we relate to other beings, as I've alluded to in the mental construct video that we did on Monday, the way that we relate to other beings is actually how we're relating to ourselves subconsciously. So when you see someone become really angry with, frustrated with, or is having or attempting to project their anger onto something else, it's not because the other thing in front of them is so aggravating and infuriating. It's because that experience is happening within themselves and they don't know how to handle it or what to do with it. And I'm guilty of this. Man, I do this all the time. I don't know what's going on. I don't know how to handle it. And so therefore I take that and I just push it out into the world, because it's so much easier to relieve the pressure of responsibility than it is for us to take responsibility, sort out our own stuff, and move from a place of complete congruency. And this is what it means to be spiritually healthy. It means taking responsibility emotionally, mentally, physically, and then allowing the inner guide to connect with the outer guide, whatever that is for you, and living your life from that place with faith, trust, and belief. So when we talk about spiritual health, like, I believe that we have this physical body, and then we have the emotional body that's just outside. So we have the physical body, and then from an auric perspective, we have the emotional body, and we have the mental body, and then we have the self, capital S, and the soul. So the soul lives in the deepest parts of us, but it's not only within us, it's all around us too. And so is the self. The self is the highest self in the soul. And so if we have a deep connection with all these parts, all these layers of our energy field, then the connection is what creates the faith and the trust. Connection with self then allows for the connection with others. Healing self allows for the healing of relationships. Healing ourselves allows for the healing of the collective, which is not really what a lot of people want to hear. Everybody wants to talk about how governments can do better, how politicians can do better, how my mum can do better, how my father didn't do very well when I was young, so therefore this happened and that happened, and that's because of this that I have the problem. And there are absolutely circumstances and events that happen in our lives that have a significant effect on how we show up in later years. However, this conversation is really about being able to take those experiences and use them, reconcile them, create something from those experiences, take responsibility for how you show up from those experiences, and then go out into the world and be a change maker because of those experiences, in spite of those experiences. Yeah. You know, I myself am in a bunch of different coaching containers. Like for me, like not I host them, but I'm in them. I'm always being coached, being mentored, being guided, being advised, because with each layer that I expose of myself, of my psyche, of my inner wounds, of my own limitations. Thanks, Lisa. With each layer that I expose, I recognize an even deeper layer of the subconscious collective psyche that comes up. And I'm going to share something with you this morning that I literally just got off a call with my coach. I'm in a coaching container where there's a very small amount of us in this container. And we started talking about something, and I'm not going to bore you with all the details of it, but what came up for me was that there is, oh, that's okay. Thanks for letting me know. What came up for me is that one of the limitations I'm imposing on myself is that of the deep collective psyche that relates to women earning and being abundant. Now, I don't personally experience that. It's not my thing. It's not my experience right now in this human form. And yet, I am processing a lot of that collective trauma that is either still being experienced in the collective around me or from my lineage. So you want to talk about spiritual health, you cannot get past the fact that I was created inside of my mum, and she was created inside of her mum, and she was created inside of her mum, which is to say that I am made of the DNA from my mother and her mother and her mother and her mother. They are parts of my inner workings, my systems, my body, my thoughts. The way that I was constructed is from the DNA from the women in my lineage, right? So I may not be experiencing anything in the world of abundance and earning right now in my life, and yet I can still feel the butting up against collective rules, lineage rules, belief systems, patterns that have come from my great, great, great grandmother. It's wild. I'm just going to leave that like just a pause here. Firstly, so that you can ask me questions about it, but also just so that it can sink in. So questions that I've been asking myself is things like, is it safe for me to slow down? Is it safe for me to slow down? Do I have faith? Here's tying it back. Do I have faith that if I slow down, in this case, my business will still be successful? Do I trust that what I have to give is enough once I've slowed down? I don't have to push and prove my worth, as I have collectively, from a lineage, been led to believe. And this is absolutely not a dig at my lineage. Let me tell you, everybody experiences this. Well, most people do. On that call that I was in this morning, there are about, I don't know, 9 of us or 8 of us, and every single woman on that call was nodding. So I don't for one second think that this is an isolated belief system. I think that it is something that has, been a topic of conversation in feminist circles for a very long time. And I'm not interested in going at it from, that point of view. I'm really interested in understanding it at a cellular level and seeing how those shifts are affecting me now. And the thing is that when I start to talk about it from a spiritual perspective, what I'm holding is the potential for things to be different. And whilst I'm going through the heaviness, the darkness, the challenge, whilst that's happening, I'm holding strong in my faith and my trust that A, I'm capable, that B, my spirit, myself, my soul has got my back, and C, that I have faith and trust in the unraveling of what's happening from a collective sense to make sure that I'm going to get to the point where I'm okay. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that, Beth. It's a really interesting dichotomy. And this is such a big conversation, right? I mean, we were 5 people on this call and we've had 2 people drop off. I'm not surprised. The reason is because this is super triggering, and also not just triggering, but you will hear it if you're meant to hear it. If you're ready to hear it and allow this information to change you, then it will land in the perfect time. This is not for everyone. When we start to talk about the mental, the physical, and the emotional bodies, like these are pretty, I wouldn't even say easy or simple, because they can be really convoluted and really full on to understand the thoughts you're thinking, the way that they're sabotaging you or tricking you, the little trickster mind. The emotional body, why am I feeling these thoughts, these feelings, what is it that I'm feeling? And also the physical body. These are all the things that you need to acknowledge to be a human being. You can't go through life without having thoughts and feelings in the physical body to a certain extent. But spiritual health is for a very select few. And in my view, you cannot live a life, a full-bodied life, embodied life, without acknowledging your spiritual health as being a really important part of it. Because if you don't have that trust and that faith in yourself and therefore the collective, as in the void, as in everything that's happening around me is for a specific person and I'm playing a part in that. Hey, baby girl, come here. Then you're going to land up feeling overwhelmed, stressed out, freaked out, worried about what's happening. And so that just feeds into the thoughts and the emotions, and that will eventually have an impact on the physical body. You know what I mean? So we can do all, no barking. No barking. We can do all the, I was telling you last week, like I'd left them out. They figured out how to get to me. They must have opened the door. So now they're here, which is fun, whatever. Moving on. Little Houdinis. Hilarious. And I just love the way he comes in here. It's been like, rough, look at me. I am here. You cannot keep me away. It's so funny. Anyway, digressing. So you can do all of the work in the mental body, all of the work on the emotional body, all of the physical exercise, all of the keeping healthy, all of the everything's, right? But if you don't have faith and trust in Whatever's happening is for the greatest good. And also faith and trust that no matter what happens, I'm going to be okay because I'm supported and I'm held and I'm resilient, and I'll be told what to do because I have a deep connection with my intuition and the field. I have a constant stream of information coming to me and guiding me. If you don't have that connection, then you may feel overwhelmed. You may feel lost. You may feel disconnected, worried, anxious, ungrounded. So my question is always, are you meditating? If you want to call it praying, do you have a prayer practice? And let's just demystify and debunk what prayer means. Okay. So I was brought up, like I said, in a Catholic home where prayer was really about going to church every morning. I mean, I went to a Catholic school, right? We used to go to church every morning at 8 o'clock and go down on our knees, put our hands together and pray for half an hour every morning. That was my upbringing. That's how I grew up. And you recited the prayers that you were given, and you believed in a God that was judgmental. You believed in this concept of a man in the sky that was looking down on you, making sure that you did everything correctly, otherwise you weren't going to get into heaven. This is basically it in a nutshell. I don't believe that anymore because I don't believe that universe, God, source is judgmental. I believe that we're here having a human experience and that there's the grandest amount of compassion bestowed upon us because we give it to ourselves and therefore we experience it. And so prayer becomes a conversation with that part of ourselves that is, that is not the thoughts, the emotions, the physical body. Prayer becomes a conversation with the void, with that which is bigger than us, with that which is contained within us and is all around us. One of my grandest, most special spiritual teachers, Caroline Mace, wrote a book called Intimate Conversations with the Divine. And it's literally her prayer book, where she has written out pages and pages of prayers. And I don't read this like a book. I read it whenever I feel that I want that extra bit of support on how to pray. Because the reason she wrote the book was because she got these questions from people saying, like, how do I pray? And she was like, this is the most ludicrous question I've ever had in my life, because what do you mean, how do I pray? You just have a conversation. It's like a rolling conversation with that which is bigger than you, basically with yourself, but you're listening for that intuitive hit and that intuitive guidance. And it's not your intuition. It actually comes from source. Your intuition and source, they kind of work together, but they're different. Okay. And so praying is a conversation with something that is bigger than you, with your belief, whatever you believe in. So the way I pray is through gratitude, is through being really present and acknowledging the beauty that I have around me, acknowledging that, yeah, things can be really challenging and uncertain and ungrounded and really difficult sometimes. But what I do have around me is so much more than what I don't have. You know, like the birds chirping, the crickets, like nature in itself, ever giving, ever generating, nurturing, loving, never stopping, always in abundance. That is a prayer. Being able to listen, absorb, and be with that is a prayer. I don't have to say anything. I don't have to ask for anything. I don't have to plan out what I want to say. I just be. That is a prayer. Prayer isn't convoluted. It's not a step-by-step process. It's an experience. It's an embodiment. You can be embodied prayer by simply living your life in presence. So what it means to have a spiritual life is what I like to call spiritual congruency, is to have your thoughts, your feelings, your behaviors, your actions in alignment. And that is what creates spiritual congruency. So you have wonderful thoughts, grateful thoughts. You feel grateful feelings. And then you go about your day doing things that allow others to see that you're grateful. That's congruency. Another way to look at congruency is like, let's look at it. A spiritual congruency is, let's say I value compassion. Okay. Which is, by the way, something that I feel is really needed in the world right now. In fact, I'm going to be hosting a workshop at some point called Holding Polarization Through Compassion, because this is really something that I feel, especially with the world being so divided as it is right now, we need to be having this conversation of like, how do I hold space for two opposing opinions in the same room, in the same conversation, in the same family, with compassion? Yeah, anyway, so let's say I have this value that compassion is necessary. Well, I can think compassionate thoughts. In the example I gave in the emotions class that I did, or the mental class that I did on Monday, like the lady comes out of the car, she sees me, she doesn't say hello to me, and then I jump to the conclusion thinking that she's ignoring me, right? The first thought that I can have if I truly value compassion is, she's got a lot going on. Maybe she didn't see me, or maybe she saw me, but she just didn't register. You know, we've all had that before. Compassionate thoughts. Feelings follow compassionate thoughts. So, oh, I hope she's okay. Like, I know that she's actually been going through a rough time. Compassionate action, sending her a text. Hey babe, saw you at the school today. You didn't see me. Just wondering how you're going. See? Thoughts, feelings, actions, congruency. Where we become incongruent is where we think, oh my gosh, she's such a bitch. I can't believe that she didn't look at me and greet me. I mean, that she looked at me and didn't greet me. And then having the feeling of like, maybe she doesn't like me. Oh, I feel like I'm not enough. I feel inadequate to be her friend. That feeling of being rejected. But when action comes, you look at her and you're like, oh my God, it's so good to see you. How are you? Yes, everything's so fine. Two-facedness, incongruent. And we all do this to some extent. And maybe the two-facedness is not because we want to be bitchy or because we want to be incongruent. It's because we don't really know how else to manage that. So how do we manage that? How do we get to the point where we become congruent? Well, first you have to make a decision that that's what you want to do. You want to live your life in complete congruency. And that's going to take some mental construct work, some emotional support work, and then taking aligned action to support those two changes. So in this example, it would be exactly what I said at the beginning. Having a thought about her, even though you may think that she's intentionally ignored you, changing that thought immediately to being more of compassion. If you're struggling with the feelings of rejection because you feel like she ignored you on purpose, then leaning into things that can help you feel more compassionate for her, learning how to cultivate a sense of compassion within the body so that you can generate those feelings and have that move into your field, which is part of the holding polarization masterclass that I'm going to be running. And then deep down, like dig deep to create aligned action steps that help you move towards the way you want to show up. So don't just think about sending the text, send the text. And if she comes back to you and says, you know, I've actually had a really hard time, such and such has happened, and gosh, I just don't even have time to like make food for my kids. I'm so stressed out and so tired. And if you have the capacity and the space, you could offer to make a meal and drop it off, or just do that. That is aligned action. Aligned action, congruency, spiritual congruency is actually following through on the things that you want to be, becoming an embodied version of your values, becoming an embodied version of the things that you aspire to. And this is where, you know, a lot of the work that has been coming through of late for me is that of virtues of the heart, which I actually believe is a spiritual practice. So it's as if you learn all of the things to do with energy and energy medicine, the physical health, emotional health, the mental health. You learn all of these tools and these practices and these ways which you can support yourself. And then you develop spiritual congruency through understanding virtues of the heart, through understanding forgiveness. Not just here, not just in your body, but like an embodied version of what does forgiveness act like? What does forgiveness experience life like? If I was forgiveness, how would I show up? So it's forgiveness, compassion, divine love, loving kindness, patience, curiosity, all of these virtues that exist within our hearts that we can only really bring up and out once we are conscious of the thoughts we think and the emotions that we feel. And if we want to have a spiritual life, if we want the fourth aspect of self to contribute towards a life of wholeness, then not only do we need the other three quadrants ticking along, and that's not to say they're perfect because I don't think they ever are, but just aware of the other quadrants, we also need to develop a spiritual practice, create space for a spiritual connection. And that can look like whatever you want it to look like. It can look like a yoga practice. It can look like a church visit. It can look like a prayer practice. It can look like a meditation practice. It could look like a chanting practice. It can look like whatever you want it to look like. But the intention to connect with the bigger realms is there. In yoga, we call this type of yoga bhakti yoga, yoga of the heart, union of the heart, which is where virtues come from. Because if you want to experience union with all parts of self, with the collective, with all realms, then you're going to need to come into union. And the way that you come into union is through the heart space and through virtues of the heart. The way that you experience yoking, which is another word for yoga, the connecting of the merging is through forgiving people and yourself, having compassion for others and yourself, treating others and yourself with loving kindness, being patient with yourself and others. Note how I'm not saying be patient with others. I'm saying be patient with yourself and others. because what is experienced inside is reverberated out into your field and moves from you out into the world, therefore it being expressed in the collective. Now I want you to just take a moment and consider all of the stuff that's going on in the world right now, and the people who are inflicting whatever's going on in the world through this lens of what they're projecting is actually what they're experiencing, their inability to process and metabolize whatever it is that's going on for them inside. The self. Yeah, Beth says that's the part I've been missing, the self. Mm-hmm. Now, this is a really big conversation because what it requires is that we separate ourselves from the ego, from what's wrong and what's right. And from an esoteric perspective, the ego looks to divide. The soul, the spirit, universal consciousness looks to unite. So I'm very interested in now talking about what we call unity consciousness, which is to say that I see myself in you because I am you. So therefore I can be more loving, be more kind, be more compassionate towards you because I see that what you're doing is because of X, Y, and Z, because I've experienced some form of that myself. And the thing is that by understanding these concepts really deeply, that doesn't mean that you don't become an activist, but what it means is that you become a sacred activist, which is to say that you go about your activism with these virtues of the heart. You don't stand on a pedestal and shame people and blame them and shout at them and tell them that they should be doing something different without the compassion, the loving kindness, giving them the space to figure it out. And of course, you know, there are so many different parts on this spectrum. Like you can be either an extremist or someone who's very silent and doing the work in solitude and quiet. Either of the ends of the spectrum are relevant and very, very necessary. But it's really important for us to recognize the times where we are trying to instigate change from a place of wounded self rather than trying to be the change maker. So what does this mean? It means that when we see someone doing something that is not in alignment with our values, instead of just launching out at them, we first take stock. We recognize that the reason it is striking a chord for us, it's triggering us, is because it already exists within us. If we understand that we are holographic in nature, we can only see that which already exists within us. So if you're watching something in the world right now and you are infuriated by it, my question is always going to be, what am I making this mean? And why do I feel such a pull towards this? Where have I experienced this before in my life? What is my connection with this, emotionally and mentally, maybe even physically? You know, we connect with things in our world because we're already connected with it in some way, shape, or form internally. So we put everything together that we've learned in session 1, 2, 3, and we come at the world events from that place, seeking to understand first seeking to understand why I feel the way I feel about X, Y, Z. And then from that place, once you've integrated all aspects of the shadow, meaning the traumas, the wounds, the unhealed experiences that you've had that are relative to what you're seeing and witnessing, once you've recalibrated from the triggers, then you go out and make change in the world. You don't make change in the world from a wounded place of self, because then you're just projecting your wounds onto everything and everyone around you. So let's bring this a little bit more, to home. Like, let's say, I'm going to use a really, really silly example to try and lighten the mood here. So let's say my husband leaves his socks on the floor next to the washing hamper. Okay. And I'm like, I used to get really upset by this, by the way. Like, I don't anymore, because I've now understood what's been triggering me about it. But say he did that and I see red. I get so angry with him. And without recalibrating and trying to understand the reasons why, I just launch an attack at him. And I say things that are hurtful and that are mean and that are just full of anger. And all he did was leave his socks next to the washing hamper, right? If I were to do some self-reflection, what I would recognize is that what I think of when he does that is that my first thought is, could he not have just put that in, like, it's 2 centimeters away. Could he not have just lifted the lid and put them in there? Oh, he must have left them there for me to do. Oh, so he thinks that that's my job. Oh, so he thinks I'm inferior. Oh, so my job is actually to be a slave to him and pick up all his washing and do his washing and fold it. And oh, so I am the one that's my job now as the wife. When all he did was leave his socks next to the washing basket, right? But I have started to make up all of these stories, which obviously create emotional reactions in my body. And those emotional reactions is where I'm projecting from. The thought, the story. And 9 times out of 10, that story comes from a cultural norm, a belief pattern. Maybe, there was something that happened when I was younger, or something that I picked up where I was like, I'm never going to be the woman who does that. Maybe in a previous relationship, that was what was expected of me. And when I broke off that relationship, I thought to myself, I'm never going to be that woman ever again. And so I haven't healed that trauma or that wound. I'm still angry about it. And my husband gets the wrath of that anger, because I haven't reconciled the thoughts about it, the feelings, and therefore that creates the projection. So in this example, what I would do is not say anything. I would bite my tongue. And last session, I said, silence is golden. It really is. Like, shh, keep it, tone it down. If you've got nothing nice to say that's considered, don't launch into an attack. Just keep your mouth shut and hold it until you figured out the reasons why you feel the way you feel. And then here is the aligned action, my friends, is have a conversation about it, do something about it in a way that is whole, that comes from wholeness. So don't forget about it. This is not about being a pushover. This is not about not being an activist, not standing up for what you believe in. This is not about keeping your mouth shut and just getting on with your life and not doing the things that make you feel, or that are important to you. This is about doing all of those things from a place of wholeness rather than projecting wounded self. And so the conversation would be very different if once I've considered all of these emotional and mental responses, understand where they come from. And then whether it be a week, a day, an hour after that, and that's the bounce back, like the more you practice this, the quicker that becomes. Sit down with my husband and just say, hey, babe, when you put your socks next to the laundry hamper, like, that makes me feel like you expect me to put them in the hamper. I don't really dig that. Can you please next time just pop them in the washing hamper? You don't even have to tell him like it makes me feel anything. You just go, listen, babe, you know, when you do that, like that's not cool. Like just put it in the hamper. You don't need to involve everybody in your stories. You have to tell everybody the reasons why you are requesting whatever it is of them, unless you want to, unless they ask you to explain. You can just cut to the chase. Hey, babe, can you just not do that? Thanks. Simple. No argument, no projection, no BS. Simple request. So if you want to take this out into the world now, let's look at all of the things that are happening now in the collective. There's so much to choose from. Think about one of the things that's going on. Like the world's erupting at the moment. Like you could be an activist for many, many things. How could you be a spiritual activist, meaning someone that addresses the situation from a place of wholeness rather than from a place of wounded self? How can you go about your work in being a change maker, a liberator, someone who is actively involved in social change, community change, familial change, whatever your jam is, from a place of wholeness rather than from a place of anger, blame, shaming, etc. And to tie it all back, this comes back to having faith in yourself to manage the situation, trust in yourself that when it is time to have the conversation or stand up for what you believe in or do the rally or whatever it is, that you will know when it's time, you will know how to act. You have trust in yourself. And also that you have a connection with spirit, self, soul that's so deep, so robust, so strong that you know your part in the bigger picture will be revealed when it's time. You know when you will be called on to be the change maker. So sometimes the world will tell you that you need to stand up for what you believe in, be loud, do all of the things. And you in your heart feel like, actually, that's not your place. Not because you're scared of it, not because you're anything, but just because, no, that's not what I'm here to do. I'm not here to stand up on a rooftop and fight for XYZ rights. Like my purpose right now is to actually fix this thing in my family. Like that's my role as an activist right now, is I'm actually changing generational patterns. I'm changing like the lineage cellular constructs in my body. I don't have capacity to go and fight for the world right now, because right now I'm actually just changing what's going on in my own body, and I'm creating a sense, in my example like I gave earlier, I'm creating a sense of abundance. I'm learning how to slow down, because I know that once I'm slow and calm and centered and grounded, I'm going to make better decisions for myself and my family. I'm going to be more effective because my creativity is going to expand, and I'm also going to be just more of service when I have the bandwidth to think about the bigger picture. But if I'm constantly rushing around, freaking out, trying to make the next dollar, hustling, grinding, then I don't make space for bigger picture thinking. And therefore I am not of service, or I'm not of service to anyone outside of my personal community or my community. And if you can start to remove yourself from personally experiencing what you're going through and zoom out a bit and see yourself as a player in the bigger picture, you will guaranteed to be less anxious, less hasty, less worried, less tense, because you will trust in the divine timing of what's going on for you. You will trust and have faith in your timing, that it will work out as it's meant to, as it has been planned by the gods. Does that make sense? Is that ringing true? This is what it means to live a spiritual life, is having that daily connection, that daily conversation with that source that is bigger than you. And then also developing a deep connection with the self and the soul to the point where you know your place. And you know that you'll be called on when the time is right to do the things that are required of you. Too many times I see women in particular become exhausted because they're trying to hurry up and do all the things that they think they should be doing in order to make a change or make a difference or do whatever. Now, what if, yeah, Beth, I used to be the same, and there's still threads of it that run through my experience now. What if it, in this example, like what if years, I don't know, 2019 to 2025 are actually about you gathering data? Like there's no action. Like if you were to look at a Gantt chart, we used to do this in business. This is the Gantt chart. Like in these weeks, it's research and development. In these weeks, it's da 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 da. In these weeks, imagine that's like spanned out over years of your lifetime. And in these years, you're gathering data, which means that we're going to, before you came down to this planet as a human in your form, you made an agreement with the powers that be that you were going to come down, you're going to be a mum of 3, and that was your plan. Maybe from years this to this, that was the entirety of what you're here to do. And then from there onwards, there's something else waiting for you. Sometimes we can push up against the things that we think we should be doing, when in actual fact, there is so much more that can be gleaned. We're so busy trying to get out of the situation we're in that we forget to mine for the gold in the situation we're in. And this is not to bypass, because man, it's difficult, man. Sometimes it's really challenging to accept what is. But it's like going on a hike, and say you're going on a day hike, and all you're focused on is getting to the destination, but you forget that you're actually in the middle of the most beautiful jungle. There's so many birds, animals, fauna and flora to be experienced and seen and taken in. One of the times that I learned this the most was actually pretty recently. Last year, around about, I don't even know what month it is. At some point last year, I took goal setting off my radar. Like I just stopped. Like I had a minimum baseline of what I wanted and how I wanted to feel, but anything above that was like gravy. And the most interesting thing happened during that time is I stopped obsessing with more, bigger. And I just started to live. Like I got my weekends back. And we were in lockdown, so it's not like I did anything crazy. I just stopped striving, hustling, grinding, and I decided to be in present mode. And the most interesting thing happened is that my business did the best it's ever done. When I didn't have the goals, when I wasn't reaching for something and making something work, and I'm talking about business-wise, right? Everything happened. Like my business just opened up. People came to me. I didn't have to hustle. And then I noticed that it was doing really well. And then I was like, oh, I better put some goals in now. Now that I've done this much, I need to do, like the next level would be to do this. The minute I put the goals in, I start constricting. And I go straight back to where I started before everything expanded. So using that in other areas of your life, I had a client once who had 2 kids. She has 2, maybe she's got more now, I don't know, but it was years ago. She had 2 kids, and she was saying to me that she, something along those lines, that when she wasn't working, all she could think about was working. And then she'd get really frustrated with her kids because they were just like running around and demanding everything of her and not giving her any space. And all she wanted to do was just close her office door and get on her laptop and do what she really loves to do. And I was like, what if you just accepted the fact that it wasn't going to get done? Like, what if right now, maybe you give yourself an hour a week or something that's so minimal, just whatever's going to keep you sane and whatever's going to keep you happy. But what if you just allowed yourself to be wholly, fully, completely for the next however long present? What if you stripped all the titles you give to yourself away? And for the next X amount of time, your life, your job title was presence. That's it. And whether that is presence as mumming, presence as wifing, presence as cleaner, presence as reader, whatever it is that you're doing at the time, you're just presence. No striving, no hustling, no goal setting, no projecting. Because here's the thing is that you want to be connected with the self and with the spirit. You have to do it in the present moment. That is where it all comes from. The present moment. And the minute that we disconnect from spirit, from self, from soul, is when we're not in the present moment. Because soul, spirit, self exists in the present moment. Connection with a realm that's bigger, larger, greater than us only exists in the present moment. And I could go off on a tangent about what time actually is, but I'm not going to. I'll just like condense it into all we have is now. Guys, stop. You're fighting over their toy. Can you hear them? You can't hear them? Oh my gosh. Stop. And so with that being said, I want to hold space for you all, both live and also those who are watching the recording, to cultivate a relationship with your spiritual health, to cultivate a relationship with the part of you that is past your thoughts and your emotions, and have that part of you connect with the field that exists all around you. And develop faith and trust, not only in yourself, first in yourself, yes, but that everything that's happening in your life and in the world at large is because it's meant to. How do you know? Because it's happening. Nothing is accident. Like, you cannot think for one moment that us as a planet flying around in the solar system, that anything that happens on this planet is just by accident or coincidence. Cannot be. Cannot be. I have so much more to say on this topic, but I think I'm going to leave it there because I don't want to confuse and bring in too many different ideas and thoughts and stories. So I think for the next 2 days until we meet again, experiment with and explore what would it mean to live a spiritually congruent life. What would it mean? What would you change? And it can be the slightest tweak. It could be simply to let go of any expectation of yourself. It could be to converse with the higher realms more in every day, not in any particular or given setting. It can be any of the above or any of your own suggestions. Just one second. And make space in your calendar for it. Make space in your life for it. Just make space for it. Because your intention to connect with your spiritual health or to develop and cultivate and strengthen your spiritual health is just the same as doing it on a physical perspective, from a physical perspective, from a mental perspective, from an emotional perspective. It's going to take practice. It's going to take time. At first, you may feel a little bit uncoordinated and weird about it, but ultimately it's second nature and it happens every moment of every day. You know, this whole thing that I was saying, you know, physical health at first, eating more greens is actually a mind mess. Like, you're thinking about it when you're going shopping, you're thinking about it all day, like you're focusing on how to eat, when to eat, how much to eat. Like, when you're first starting out on a healthy lifestyle food wise, let me just put them outside. Back. When you first start on anything like this, it takes focus, concentration, dedication, commitment. Same thing when you're starting to think better thoughts or notice the thoughts that you're having, whether it's a meditation practice or actually looking at thought analysis. This is practice. Same emotionally. And then all of a sudden you look back in a couple of years' time and you recognize that you're doing this in everyday life, in the moment, on the spot. You know, I had this moment this morning where I was watching hubby play with a puppy. He's like playing with her, and I've lost count with the amount of times that he's had his nose bitten by her. Like, since she was a puppy, like, he does this thing where he like plays with her and puts his head in her grill and then she bites him and he's like, oh. And I'm like, I don't know how many times you have to do that before you recognize that she's going to bite your nose. Like, this is just how it is. But then I had this moment, I was just watching. I didn't say anything. For the first time, I didn't like reprimand and be like, oh, of course it's gonna be, you know, but I just kept quiet and I was watching, right? And I recognized this really beautiful thing. And this comes from like watching, questioning, seeing what comes up in my own mind, noticing how I'm feeling, being curious about the thoughts I'm having. Where do those thoughts come from? Why am I thinking those thoughts? Like, it's just a constant, right? And I'm not saying be over analytical, but what happens is over time, the curiosity, it happens really quickly. The questions happen quickly, and then the downloads happen really quickly. At first, it took it was a process, like a journaling process. You'd sit down every day and write it out. Now it just kind of happens in the moment. And what I realized was there's a very big difference between my husband and I, Andre, is that he wasn't brought up in a way that was, in a way that had him be careful all the time. Like, I'm pretty sure that, and I can see this in my family, and it's only there because they love us kids. I mean, I'm still a kid in our family as far as I'm concerned. Our adults in our family love us so much that they want to protect us from falling, hitting our heads, running too fast. Don't do this, don't do that, don't touch that, don't run, don't no, right? It was just always like, you're going to hurt yourself, you're going to cry, if you do that, you're going to, like, it was just constant. And it's because they didn't want us to hurt ourselves. They didn't want us to cry, right? Damned if you do, damned if you don't. Because if they were just sitting back, letting us do everything and, bumping our heads and crying, like, we probably would have considered that nobody loved us and nobody cared about us. And so we would have a whole different set of problems, right? So it's damned if you do, damned if you don't. But he was brought up in a home where that wasn't the narrative. So in his mind, he's not constantly reacting to that fear of like being hurt. So he's just going to, live his life in the moment. And, maybe one day Lily will wake up and not bite him on the nose, and he's okay with that. And I use this as such a simple example, but we all live from that place that we were brought up with. And whether it's from this lifetime or another lifetime or whatever. And it takes for us to become really quiet and to develop a strong relationship with the parts of ourselves that are inquisitive, that are open, that are receptive, that are willing to be guided, that are willing to hear advice, guidance from our soul, from universe, from source, from the void, so that these beautiful moments of deep, deep, deep love and appreciation can drop in. And that is what I'm talking about here, is developing a connection with that part of yourself that doesn't speak until you're quiet. They cannot speak louder than a whisper. You have to quieten the mind, relieve yourself of your emotional addictions. And only then, when you're in this place of space, when you're in the present moment, watching your life free from thoughts, feelings, judgments, expectations, that is where the nuggets of wisdom drop in. That's where you receive the most. And for some of us, receiving is uncomfortable, and we have to learn how to do this. And so it's going to take practice. And so spiritual health is really about this connection with the part of ourselves that doesn't speak in high tones, isn't loud, It's a connection with a part of us that is so much bigger than what exists within our physical body. It's a faith and a trust in ourselves and the universe that the play that is being played right now, the story that is being played in the world at large right now, is exactly what's meant to happen. And we are on this planet at this time for a very specific reason. And whether that be you, the one person who's at home meditating and praying away from everyone and just being on your own and changing the things that are within your power to change, or you're the person that's at the front of the rally with a loudspeaker and a board. It doesn't matter how you go about being the change maker. It's none of anyone else's business. What's important is that you're doing it in congruency with you, with your purpose, with your dharma, with your soul. And the only way you're going to know whether that is right for you or right now for you is through silence, solitude, contemplation, and prayer. So, to bring the session to a close, I'd like for you to take a moment, and you can close your eyes if you like. Just close your eyes and feel into, what is it that I can do over the next 2 days that will help me find spiritual congruency, that will help me lean into a deeper connection with source and self. And then send a little wish that you find the courage and the commitment and the devotion to go about and take aligned action to bring that into your experience. And you can open your eyes. Any questions or anything? You're welcome, Lisa. You're welcome, Beth. Now you stay right there. I'm just going to make one little announcement before we complete this recording, is that I will be hosting that polarization masterclass. And what I've decided to do, and it'll be further on in the year, what I've decided to do is offer it as a free bonus session for anyone who chooses to do Lessons in Truth for this year. So firstly, Lessons in Truth won't be offered in 2023. I made that decision a few days ago. 2022 is the last time for the foreseeable future that Lessons in Truth will be hosted, and there will be a full alumni year that will be happening over the year 2023, which is to say that everyone who's completed levels 1, 2, and 3, which is the program now of Lessons in Truth, will go into a container in 2023 where we'll just riff about everything that we've learned and integrate it into our lives. So one of the ladies asked me to create a 24-month payment plan, which I've done. And so what will happen is that will run for the full 2 years, that payment plan. And over those 2 years, you'll be in container for the full amount of time. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is that the masterclass will be included for free. Okay. So for those of you who are watching the recording, thank you so much for being here with me live as with you, Beth. And I am so excited to be with you over the next 2 sessions, which are going to be incredibly powerful because now we've got all 4 of the quadrants And what we're going to do is learn application methods in how. This is where like the actual how comes in. How do we apply all of these things? You can come live, or you can send your questions prior with anything that you've got going on in your life, because I'm going to be using live examples and or written examples that have been sent into me so that I can support you in those 2 sessions for free. All right, my friends. I'll see you soon. Bye for now.